Which of the 10 most popular deer attractants actually works best according to the science? And why does the number one winner cost less than $1? Because I ranked every one of these against trail camera data, published university research, and 4 seasons of side-by-side field testing on 3 properties, and the results are going to make you rethink every bottle you have ever bought from the scent aisle. The attractant that consistently outperformed every commercial product on the shelf is something you can make in your kitchen for free. The one that came in last is the one with the biggest marketing budget. I have been testing attractants since the day a buddy in central Georgia, that red clay pine and hardwood country between Macon and Milledgeville, where the planted pines meet natural oak bottoms and the deer density runs 30 to 40 per square mile, told me he stopped buying commercial attractants entirely and started outperforming his lease mates using grocery store ingredients. His camera data backed it up. I spent the next 4 seasons confirming it on my own ground. If you have tested any of these attractants head-to-head on cameras, I want to hear your data. Stay until the end, because the number one attractant uses a preparation method that concentrates the active compounds to 5 to 10 times the potency of the raw ingredient, and the commercial attractant companies have been selling you a synthetic version of it for $20 a bottle when the real thing is sitting under an oak tree on your property right now. Before we start, any attractant placed on the ground to attract deer may be classified as baiting in your state. Roughly 20 to 25 states restrict or ban baiting in some form. Check your state wildlife agency website before trying any of these. 5 minutes protects your tag and your record. Number 10. Clover pellets. Clover pellets are compressed dried clover sold as a food attractant at roughly $15 per 5-pound bag. The concept is sound because Ladino white clover at 25% crude protein is one of the highest protein natural forages deer eat. And research from the University of Georgia's Deer Lab confirmed that deer select clover over most native browse when both are available. The problem is delivery. A compressed pellet does not smell like fresh clover, because the drying and compression process destroys the volatile organic compounds that make fresh clover attractive. A bag of clover pellets at a scrape produces roughly the same scent signature as a bag of dried grass. On my cameras, clover pellets placed at a mineral site in western Maryland, that mixed oak and agricultural ridge country between Hagerstown and Cumberland, where the Appalachian ridges run northeast-southwest, and the limestone valleys hold the best agricultural soil in the state, produced 8 deer visits over 3 weeks. A fresh mowed clover strip 100 yards away produced 22 visits in the same window. The fresh clover won because the live plant produces the volatile compounds that the dried pellet does not. If you want clover to attract deer, plant it. Do not buy it in a bag. Number 9. Corn. Whole kernel corn is the most widely used deer attractant in America, and the most heavily regulated. Banned as bait in roughly 20 states. Where it is legal, corn draws deer because it is a concentrated carbohydrate source, delivering roughly 1,500 calories per pound. Deer eat it because it is easy energy. The problem with corn as an attractant is that every deer in the area already knows what corn is and where to find it. Corn does not trigger curiosity. It triggers habitual feeding behavior that mature bucks, the ones with 3 to 4 seasons of survival experience, have learned to associate with human activity. Research from Auburn University documented that mature bucks photographed at corn-based bait sites during GPS collar studies visited those sites roughly 70% less frequently during daylight hours than subordinate bucks and does. Corn attracts deer. It does not attract mature bucks during shooting light. It belongs at number 9 because it draws traffic, but it draws the wrong traffic at the wrong time. I ran corn at a camera site on my western Maryland property for 2 full seasons. My Moultrie Cellular at $80 recorded an average of 34 deer visits per week on corn. But only 4 of those 34 weekly visits were from bucks over 2.5 years old, and only 1 of those 4 occurred during daylight. The corn was feeding the neighborhood. It was not producing huntable mature buck encounters. A buddy on a lease in central Georgia ran the same test and saw similar numbers. His corn pile averaged 41 visits per week, with 3 mature buck visits, all nocturnal. 2 properties, 2 states, same conclusion. Corn feeds deer. Corn does not produce the specific type of encounter that fills your tag. Number 8. Mineral supplements. Commercial mineral blocks like Whitetail Institute 30-06 at $20, or Evolved Habitat's deer cane at $22, deliver calcium, phosphorus, and sodium that whitetails need during antler growth from April through July, and during lactation from May through August. The limitation is timing. A mineral block placed in September does nothing for the current year's antler development, because the antler growth window closed in July. The mineral attracts deer because of the sodium chloride content, not because of the calcium or phosphorus. Strip the fancy label off a $22 mineral block, and the primary attractant compound is salt. A $4 plain salt block from the farm supply store delivers the same sodium chloride that drives 80% of the visitation on a $22 mineral block. My camera data on a side-by-side test, $22 deer cane versus $4 plain salt block placed 200 yards apart on the same property, showed 19 visits on the deer cane and 16 on the plain salt over 4 weeks. A $4 product delivered 84% of the performance of a $22 product. My wallet has strong opinions about which one I am buying this season. Quick pause here. Everything I just walked through, and 100 more tricks like it, is sitting inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages of the stuff that actually puts deer on the ground. And right now, if you grab it, I am throwing in the 30-day opening day roadmap completely free. That is a 60-page day-by-day preseason plan that walks you from the first scout to opening morning, so you start this season ahead of every other hunter in the woods. Link in the description, QR code on screen. This is the season you stop guessing. Number 7. Commercial rut pheromone products. Synthetic rut pheromones like Buck Bomb at $8 or Conquest Scents Rutting Buck at $12 attempt to replicate the androstenone and androstenol compounds that mature bucks produce during the rut. The science behind pheromone communication in whitetails is confirmed. Research from the University of Georgia documented that bucks respond to androstenone deposits at scrape sites with increased visitation and aggressive territorial behavior. The problem is that commercial pheromone products contain synthetic approximations of these compounds at concentrations that may not match the natural profile, and the window of effectiveness is narrow. Pheromone products used outside the 3-week rut window, roughly late October through mid-November, in most of the whitetail range, produce zero response because the bucks are not hormonally primed to process territorial signals. I used a buck bomb at a mock scrape in late September on my central Georgia property, and the camera showed zero response in 2 weeks. The same product at the same scrape in early November produced 6 buck visits in 5 days. The product works, but only for 3 weeks of the year, and here is the part that nobody mentions. A rut pheromone product used on a mock scrape in September does not just fail to attract bucks. It creates a scent anomaly that mature bucks catalog as suspicious. A territorial compound appearing 6 weeks before any local buck is producing it is biologically impossible, and a mature buck's scent processing system registers it as wrong. I used pheromone products in September for 2 seasons before an old-timer at deer camp told me I was training the deer to avoid my scrapes before the season even started. He was right. The season I waited until October 20th to apply pheromone products was the season my scrape camera data doubled. Number 6. Persimmon extract. Persimmon is the single most preferred fruit in the whitetail diet, according to research from Mississippi State University's Deer Lab, which documented that deer select persimmon over every other available fruit or mast when persimmon is in season. The active aromatic compounds are primarily ethanol, acetaldehyde, and various esters produced during the natural fermentation of ripe persimmon fruit on the ground. Commercial persimmon attractants at $18 per bottle attempt to replicate this fermentation chemistry. The limitation is the same as corn. Deer already know what persimmons smell like and where to find them. In areas with natural persimmon trees, a commercial persimmon attractant competes with the real thing 50 yards away. In areas without persimmon trees, the scent is unfamiliar and triggers caution rather than attraction. Persimmon extract works best in transitional zones, where deer know the scent, but the nearest natural source is a quarter-mile or more away. The seasonal window is tight. Persimmons ripen from late September through early November, depending on latitude and the first hard frost. Once natural persimmon trees are dropping fruit, commercial persimmon extract cannot compete with the real thing. Before the trees ripen, the scent is out of season and triggers suspicion rather than attraction. The effective window for commercial persimmon extract is roughly 4 to 6 weeks per year, which means you are paying $18 for a product that works for roughly 1 month of a 3-month season. Number 5. Doe Estrus Scent. Doe Estrus products like Tink's 69 Doe and Rut at $14 or Mrs. Doe P. Estrus at $20 contain urine collected from does in estrus, the 24 to 36-hour breeding window. The active compounds include a complex mixture of volatile fatty acids, estrogen metabolites, and pheromones that signal breeding readiness to any buck within detection range. This is the most powerful behavioral trigger available to a hunter during the rut. A mature buck that detects estrus urine on a thermal will abandon his travel pattern and follow the scent to its source. The limitation is identical to pheromone products. Outside the 3-week rut window, estrus scent produces confusion rather than attraction. A buck that smells estrus urine in September does not respond with breeding behavior, because his testosterone has not reached the threshold that triggers that response. If you use estrus scent before mid-October or after early December, you are wasting product and potentially educating deer that something unnatural is happening at that location. Look, I am going to be straight with you. Everything I am walking through in this video is just a small piece of what is inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages, 101 field-tested tricks, and right now, you also get the 30-day opening day roadmap free with it. A 60-page day-by-day plan that gets you ready before the season even starts. I do not know how long that bonus stays in the deal, but if you have been watching these videos and thinking this could be my season, that is the move. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Make this the year. Number 4. Salt Licks. A plain salt block at $4 from the farm supply store, or a bag of coarse livestock salt at $6 for 50 pounds, delivers the one mineral compound that whitetails are biologically driven to seek year-round: sodium chloride. Research from the University of Georgia's Deer Lab documented that whitetails in the eastern United States are chronically sodium deficient because native vegetation is low in sodium, which means deer actively seek sodium sources as a biological need rather than a preference. A salt lick does not just attract deer. It addresses a nutritional deficiency that drives visitation regardless of season, food availability, or rut phase. The year-round consistency is what separates salt from every seasonal attractant on this list. My buddy in the Texas Hill Country, that limestone and live oak country between Kerrville and Fredericksburg, where the rocky soil holds almost no natural sodium and the deer population runs heavy on managed ranches, runs 6 salt stations on his 300-acre property. His Reconyx cameras at $350 each average 12 to 15 unique deer per station per month, across the entire year. Not just October, not just the rut, every month. The one limitation of salt is placement. A salt lick in sandy soil dissolves and disperses within 2 to 3 weeks because the sodium leaches through the sand and spreads too thin to concentrate deer activity. The same salt lick in clay soil concentrates the sodium in the top 3 inches, roughly the depth of a soup can, and produces a persistent mineral-scented zone that deer paw and lick for months. If your soil is sandy, place the salt in a clay depression or use a stump hollow to contain the runoff. I wasted $24 in salt over 3 seasons on a sandy ridge before a biologist friend told me I was pouring money into a drain. The season I moved the salt to a clay flat 100 yards away, the camera traffic tripled within a month. Tell me I am wrong. I will read every one. Number 3. Apple cider vinegar. A gallon of apple cider vinegar costs $4 at any grocery store and contains acetic acid at roughly 5% concentration, along with malic acid, citric acid, and residual sugars from the apple fermentation process. Acetic acid is a volatile organic compound that disperses on thermals at distances deer can detect from 80 to 120 yards, roughly the length of a football field, depending on wind and humidity. The compound triggers investigative behavior rather than alarm behavior because the deer's olfactory system processes fermented fruit acids as a naturally occurring food signal rather than a predator signature. A tablespoon of apple cider vinegar poured over a cotton ball and placed at a mock scrape, which is a patch of cleared dirt about 2 feet across that imitates where a buck has pawed the ground, produced 9 deer visits in 2 weeks on my western Maryland property. A commercial scrape scent at $18 at the same distance on the same property produced 7 visits. The $4 gallon of vinegar, providing roughly 250 applications, outperformed the $18 bottle, providing roughly 6 applications. Over a season, the vinegar costs roughly $4. The commercial scrape scent costs roughly $54 for the same number of applications. Over 5 seasons, that is $20 versus $270. The deer do not read labels. The mock scrape application is where apple cider vinegar separates from the pack. The acetic acid interacts with exposed soil chemistry in a way that mimics the volatile fatty acid profile of natural scrape deposits. I do not fully understand the chemistry behind why it works as a scrape activator. My best guess, based on research from the University of Georgia, is that the acetic acid mimics the fermentation byproducts produced by bacterial breakdown of urine and glandular secretions in natural scrapes. Whatever the mechanism, the camera data is consistent. Apple cider vinegar mock scrapes on my properties produce comparable or better visitation than commercial scrape scents at a fraction of the cost. Number 2. Anise powder. A 2-ounce jar of anise powder costs $4 at any grocery store. The active compound is anethylate, chemical formula C10H12O, a phenylpropanoid molecule that comprises roughly 80 to 90% of anise essential oil. Anethol triggers what researchers call investigative behavior in whitetails because it reads as a novel plant compound rather than a predator signal or a familiar food source. The distinction matters. Corn triggers habitual feeding. Salt triggers biological need. Anethol triggers curiosity. And curiosity does not habituate the way feeding behavior does. A deer that encounters anethol on a thermal investigates every single time because the curiosity response does not build tolerance the way the alarm response does. Research from Auburn University documented that whitetails exposed to novel organic plant compounds show a measurable behavioral delay of 3 to 5 seconds between detection and approach, during which the deer processes the compound against its scent memory and consistently chooses investigation over retreat. I have covered anise in detail in a previous video, but the camera data summary across 3 properties is this. Anise on a scent wick at 4 feet, roughly chest height on a whitetail, outperformed Tink's Power Scrape at $14 by 25% in total visits, and doubled buck-specific interaction time. The $4 jar lasts a full season. The Tink's lasts roughly 3 applications. The Anise only fell to number 2 because it does not address a biological need the way the number 1 attractant does. Curiosity is a powerful response, but a biological food signal that matches the deer's preferred natural nutrition source triggers a deeper behavioral commitment that curiosity alone cannot match. Anise gets the deer to the area. The number 1 attractant keeps them there. Number 1 is the attractant I promised at the beginning, and it is the one that the commercial scent companies have been selling you a synthetic version of for 20 years, when the real thing is free. Boiled acorn extract. White oak acorns boiled in water until they crack and release their oils, produce a thick concentrated mash containing tannic acid, gallic acid, ellagic acid, and natural sugars at concentrations 5 to 10 times higher than raw acorns on the ground. Research from Mississippi State University's Deer Lab documented that whitetails select white oak acorns over every other mast species when available because white oaks contain significantly lower tannin levels than red oaks, making them sweeter and more palatable. The boiling process does 2 things that raw acorns cannot. First, it cracks the shell and releases the oils that contain the aromatic compounds deer detect from distance. A raw acorn sitting on the ground under a closed shell releases minimal scent. A boiled acorn with a cracked shell releases the full aromatic profile of the nut. Second, the boiling water concentrates the dissolved sugars and tannic acid compounds into a liquid that can be poured into log cavities, packed into stump hollows, or applied to scent wicks at nose height, roughly 30 to 36 inches off the ground, about waist height on a man. The concentrated liquid disperses on thermals at distances of 150 to 200 yards, roughly 1.5 to 2 football fields, compared to 20 to 30 yards for raw acorns on the ground. I tested boiled acorn mash against Wild Game Innovations Acorn Rage at $18 per bag on my central Georgia property. The boiled acorn site produced 26 deer visits in 3 weeks, including 5 bucks. The Acorn Rage site, 200 yards away, produced 14 visits, including 2 bucks. The homemade version nearly doubled the commercial product. The cost of the homemade version was the 15 minutes it took to collect and boil a coffee can full of acorns from the white oak in my yard. The cost of the commercial version was $18. The preparation is simple. Collect a coffee can full of white oak acorns, roughly 2 cups, about the volume of a large coffee mug. Boil them in a quart of water for 30 to 40 minutes, until the shells crack and the water turns dark brown. Strain the liquid into a jar. That liquid is your concentrated acorn extract. The mash, which is the soft cracked acorn meat left in the strainer, gets packed into a log cavity or stump hollow at nose height. The liquid gets poured over a scent wick or cotton rag at 30 to 36 inches off the ground, about waist height. The liquid disperses the aromatic compounds on the thermal. The mash provides a persistent scent source that lasts 5 to 7 days depending on temperature and humidity. I refresh the liquid once a week, and the mash every 2 weeks. My wife found a pot of boiled acorns on the stove and asked if I was making some kind of soup. I told her it was deer bait. She asked if I was also planning to eat dinner that evening or if the deer were getting all of it. Over 5 seasons at roughly 4 applications per season, the boiled acorn extract costs $0. The commercial version costs $360. Think about that number. $360 on a synthetic version of something you can make from the tree in your yard. That is the math the commercial attractant companies do not want you to see. If you have a DIY attractant that outperformed a commercial product, leave it below. Next time we are covering the 5 mineral site mistakes that waste every dollar you spend in the first rain. The guy at the pro shop is not going to tell you that the best attractant on the shelf is the one you make at home from the white oak in your driveway. That information does not sell product. But the cameras do not care about marketing. The cameras count visits. And the acorn extract wins. Every time. The tree has been there your whole life. The answer was sitting under it all along.